Hey everyone, Double Crit Fail here, and as most of you already know, this past week we received some huge news as Critical Role came out and announced that they would be using Dungeons & Dragons, not Daggerheart, for their upcoming Campaign 4. And this news left a lot of people, myself included, shocked. Because Darrington Press had just spent years developing this new system, Daggerheart, and it was released to both commercial and critical success, to the point that even 3 months later, post-release, it's still hard to find on shelves. It's sold out most places. So this announcement left a lot of people confused. Critical Role not using their flagship product on their flagship show felt inconceivable and a bit like a marketing blunder. And to a lot of people in the Daggerheart community, it felt like a dagger to the heart, to pardon the expression. And some people, both fans of and detractors of Daggerheart, were saying that this was a sign that Daggerheart was doomed. Please live for your life. And I'm here to say, probably not, okay? So this announcement dropped the same day as my last video upload. As always, I have impeccable timing, so I'm very late to the discourse, but I don't regret it because, first of all, my last video had this moment.
Against an asteroid.
And second of all, because this extra time has given me more time to reflect. And I have come to a conclusion that if you had asked me a week ago, I would have laughed and thought it sounded ridiculous, but it's this. Critical Role choosing D&D for Campaign 4 might actually be the best thing for Daggerheart. And I'm gonna break down 5 reasons why. Starting with number 1, Daggerheart gets to be its own game. So let's be honest, if Campaign 4 had used Daggerheart as its system, that would mean that this game would forever be tied to Critical Role, even more so than it already is. And it would create a bit of a Matt Mercer effect, except for the entire system. Fans would always be comparing their Daggerheart home game to what they saw in Critical Role, which would be touted as the correct version, and anything that deviated too much from that, either through rulings or in tone, might even be considered blasphemous. And I feel that that outlook and that mentality is unfair to the system because Daggerheart was never meant to be Critical Role, the TTRPG. It was meant to be a collaborative storytelling game with unique mechanics and cool cards and a tone very different from D&D. So by avoiding Critical Role's spotlight, I feel that Daggerheart is now going to get an opportunity to form its own identity. Instead of having a mega campaign defining what this game is, we're instead gonna get to see it through dozens of viewpoints. From the Critical Role one-shots highlighting different campaign frames, to other actual play shows like Dungeons & Daddies or Legends of Evantris, to Critical Role itself, as Matt Mercer has announced that they will be doing a sequel to Age of Umbra. And most of all, it means that for us, both as players and GMs, we're going to get a chance to discover the system and find what it means to us individually. We're gonna have thousands of games with their own vibes, and that's gonna give Daggerheart a chance to prove itself outside of the Critical Role bubble. And that brings me to number 2. Daggerheart benefits from D&D success. Whether or not you like it, D&D is the cultural touchstone for TTRPGs. It's recognized by the mainstream. I mean, if you tell someone that you enjoy playing TTRPGs, 9 out of 10 times they're gonna say, what the heck is that? And then the other 1 out of 10 times they're gonna say, oh, you mean like D&D? Because D&D is a recognizable brand, and Critical Role is mainstream entertainment that attracts millions of viewers. And as weird as it sounds, a lot of fans of Critical Role were saying online that if Critical Role stopped playing D&D and switched fully to Daggerheart, they would simply stop watching. That sounds weird, but you have to remember that for an actual play, the appeal is to know the rules and be able to follow along. You get to understand what it means to roll a critical failure, or why a powerful spell is so clutch. Daggerheart, on the other hand, is still very new, and most of the Critical Role audience hasn't played it, and many of them never will. So by switching to Daggerheart over D&D, you actually risk alienating a large swath of the audience. But by keeping Campaign 4 in D&D, Critical Role gets to keep the door open to the mainstream and attract those millions of viewers, and some of them will find out about this weird game called Daggerheart that their favorite actual play developed, and they'll become interested in it. I mean, honestly, that's a large part of why Daggerheart launched to such great success in the first place. Critical Role was a recognized brand, so why would they do something that might hamper that? And there's another reason that Daggerheart might want to stay away from Campaign 4, because number 3, Daggerheart avoids the Campaign 4 pressure cooker. So if you know anything about Campaign 4, you probably know that it's already Critical Role's boldest experiment ever, and they haven't even aired episode 1. It has a brand new setting, Ahriman, as they're stepping away from the world of Exandria entirely. It has the largest cast ever in a Critical Role season with 13 players, which are going to be rotating groups in kind of a West Marches style. And the biggest change of all, Matt Mercer is stepping down and allowing Brennan Lee Mulligan to step behind the screen as he takes on the role of Game Master. And I couldn't be more excited because Brennan Lee Mulligan is actually my favorite Game Master, and that shouldn't be taken as a slight to Matt, but rather a huge compliment to Brennan because Matt Mercer is so incredible. Now, this is a lot of moving pieces and a lot of risks. Will fans like this new play style of a rotating cast, and will Brennan Lee Mulligan be accepted, or is he gonna always be compared to Matt? And will this new world resonate like Exandria has? And if Campaign 4 had used Daggerheart, I would be concerned that any kind of stumble, any kind of pacing issue, any kind of complaint that it doesn't feel like Critical Role, it wouldn't be blamed on all those other changes. It would be blamed squarely on Daggerheart, and that would risk Daggerheart being branded as the reason Campaign 4 failed, if that were to ever happen. But using D&D removes that variable, and it allows Campaign 4 to experiment in all these big ways while allowing Daggerheart to continue to grow via smaller arcs and projects. And speaking of that, number 4, shorter arcs keep Daggerheart fresh. A multi-year Critical Role campaign using the core rules set would risk freezing this version of Daggerheart in time for years, kind of like the mosquito stuck in amber, unless they really wanted to change up the campaign anytime something was innovated or pivoted or experimented with, whereas shorter arcs allow for constant freshness and innovation. I mean, we've already seen it in Critical Role with Menagerie and Age of Umbra. Menagerie allowed us to get a peek at the system when it was still in beta stage, and Age of Umbra showed off the system in its final core rulebook form. And both of these arcs felt to me completely different and showed off how Daggerheart played in different play styles and settings, some of different mechanics, and both felt energized, not overexposed by the time that they were done. And I think that they can continue this on because at Gen Con we had a lot of announcements. They showed off some of the new playtest mechanics from the Void. Chris Perkins hinted at a possible organized play style similar to Adventure League or Pathfinder Society. Jeremy Crawford hinted at possibly developing a brand new setting. Keith Baker and Jen Ellis of Together Studios announced that they're working on a source book. And just imagine if we did have these little spoonfuls of content divvied out to us, and then Critical Role could run shorter spotlight arcs for these new mechanics and these new innovations. It would allow this game to evolve publicly and us to evolve alongside of it. It would allow Daggerheart to become a living, breathing system instead of something static. And last of all, number 5, it's all part of a bigger picture. When Critical Role came to the fork of whether they play Daggerheart or whether they play Dungeons and Dragons, they decided to, as Matt Mercer says, do both.
Both!
Ah! And, you know, some see that as a bit of a cop-out, but it's actually the best of both worlds because Campaign 4 using D&D allows a mainstream audience to stay engaged, while Daggerheart, served in these smaller slices, allows it to grow at its own pace. Now, you gotta remember that Critical Role and Darrington Press, these are not amateurs. They pioneered the concept of actual play. They brought it from a living room stream to one of the most watched shows on Twitch. And they've expanded into a multimedia empire, and they put out everything from comics to novels to an animated series D&D supplements, even a recently announced video game, not to mention a publishing arm in Darrington Press, which allowed them to be able to experiment and have full creative control to make something like Daggerheart exist in the first place. So if you are wondering whether this was a carefully thought out strategy, I would almost entirely assure you the answer is yes. Betting against this team is a little like betting against gravity. And to me, it's not shoving a dagger into Daggerheart, but instead more like sending a kid to college. It allows them to experiment and discover themselves and grow before taking on the big responsibility of a full-blown campaign. So the reality of the situation is that those closest to the issue and who have given it the most thought have decided that for Campaign 4, the best system is Dungeons & Dragons. And at the same time, Critical Role and Darrington Press are still investing heavily into Daggerheart's future. Both of these things can be true at the same time. They don't contradict, and in fact, they coexist in harmony. And as for Campaign 4 itself, I personally am excited. I look forward to checking it out, even if it is Dungeons & Dragons. And as I said, I think ultimately, over the long term, this will work out best for Daggerheart as a system. And ultimately, that's what I want to see. I want to see Daggerheart thrive as a system, and not just because selfishly that means more people clicking on my Daggerheart videos, although shameless plug, I do have one called 5 Reasons You Should and Shouldn't Try Daggerheart, so I'll link that one down below. But because this hobby wins when more games succeed, and when more stories get told, and when more people find a spot at the table, whether they're playing Dungeons & Dragons or Daggerheart or something completely different. But, you know, those are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours too. Do you think Critical Role made the right choice, or do you think they should have gone all in Daggerheart? Also, if you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like or subscribe button for future TTRPG content, because it really does help this channel grow. Speaking of which, I've had tremendous growth recently, and none of that would be possible without you. So for everybody tuning in, I just want to say thank you. And as always, may your day be a critical success.